Okay, back again. It's been a long time. As the title suggests, this video is going to go through the signal flow pretty much from start to finish of my small project studio. This is all going to be screen capture, so you're not going to see my handsome face in this video. It is going to be a long video, so if you're not interested in efficient signal flow, move on. It's completely fine. If you are interested in getting the most out of your equipment and the most possibilities for recording in, playing out of, resampling, sound design and so on, stick around. So this is going to be in 3 different sections. So the first section is going to be looking at the inputs and output possibility of the audio interfaces that I'm using. And that's correct, audio interfaces. So I'm going to be going through the aggregate device that I'm using. The second part, or the second chapter, will be the Pro Tools workflow, or the DAW workflow. I'm going to be demonstrating it in Pro Tools, but it works for all of the other DAWs. The settings are exactly the same. And then lastly, I'm going to be going through the OBS setup, or the recordable setup for this, whether that's for live streaming, whether that's for content videos and so on. But yeah, as I mentioned, it's going to be a long one, so let's get started. Okay, part 1. This is the audio interface setup. So as mentioned before, the audio interfaces that I'm using, first of all, I'm using the Apollo 8. I think it's the 2nd generation, or the black faceplate version. Is an 8 input audio interface, and it has 8 outputs as well. But I'm also combining that as an aggregate device with the Audient Evo 16 audio interface. Now these two work amazing together. The Evo 16 is the same input and output amounts, or analog ins and outs. So it's got 8 ins and 8 outs, which then brings my overall aggregate device working as one device to a 16 in, 16 out device. Now, just to start with, let me get rid of some of these plugins. I'll get back to these in a bit and what they're for. If I just come over and open up my audio MIDI setup, so this is just looking at the audio devices. You can see here on the left, I've got all of these different possible audio devices, many of which are sort of internal devices, I suppose, or virtual audio interfaces made with something called Loopback. But at the bottom here, I've got one called Apollo and Evo Analog. And you can see I've just made this. So if you want to make your own, you can just go down to the plus icon in the audio window and create an aggregate device here. I've labeled this Apollo and Evo because it's the Apollo and the Evo. And it's called Analog because I'm taking advantage of all of the analog ins and outs. You can see here, all of these other ones aren't in this aggregate device, but I could add them to it if I want to. But under the sub-devices, the first inputs, or the first ins and outs, are from the Apollo, and the second lot of ins and outs are from the Evo, but they all work collectively as one audio interface. You can see we've got the inputs from left to right, so we've got the MPC drums, MPC instruments, and MPC bass. We've then got bus comp. These are the first 4 stereo inputs, so the complete 8 inputs of the Apollo. But then from this stage on, from mixer here, we've got the mixer, which is the first 2 Evo inputs. We've got mic. You can see I'm not using the mono here because I don't have the mono synth connected anymore. It's just a free available mono input if I need to use it. Most of the time I will just use that as like either just a quick plug-in mono synth or a guitar input. We've got the mic coming in here, which is the input 4 on the Evo. But you see I've got it all in the console. We've then got the Eurorack, and we've then got the tape. But this just means that I can take advantage of the UAD Apollo plugins on the way in. So I could record through certain plugins. So for instance, you can see my mic, or the words from my mouth are coming through the mic on this channel here. This is a Evo input, but it's coming through the plugin process here. So again, if I just turn this off, you'll hear that my voice has obviously changed. But when I turn this back on again, I've now got the processing recording through the channel strip. But anyway, let's move on. The next inputs is the Eurorack. So I've got a small Eurorack system, small Eurorack setup, which is a stereo output. So it's a stereo input into my Apollo here, but again, coming through the Evo. And then the tape is a cassette player, the We Are Rewind cassette player. This Mac here, this track, is a virtual input. So this has all of the returns, basically, from all of the DAWs. They get returned to this Mac channel here, and I've also got everything else that comes through the computer, so things like anything from Chrome, YouTube, Tidal, Spotify, basically anything that plays through the computer comes through this Mac track, which means I can then record that into things like OBS and Pro Tools, but we'll get to that when we get to those sections. The other thing I do want to talk about is the auxiliary section here, the auxiliaries and the cues. So with this, how I'm working this, auxiliary 1, you can see here auxiliary 1, nothing's happening, it's a post fader auxiliary. This is just if I want to add things like reverb or delay or sort of parallel effects while I'm messing around with things. Auxiliary 2, this is everything is sent to, basically. So every single track in here is sent to auxiliary 2, with the Max slightly quieter. Now what this is, you can see this coming through just here. Like if I just go closer, my voice is here. If I lean back a bit, it's not going to work. If I turn this off, you'll see that now nothing happens in this track. This is basically the levels for any kind of streaming as a stereo stream. So if I just open up this, all of these levels are what I would be sending to something like a Twitch stream or some kind of YouTube live stream or something like that. I just get really quick fire access to the volumes being sent to that platform, completely separate from my overall output volumes here. Because as you can see, auxiliary 2, is pre-fader. So this is the level that will go to any of those platforms that I send here in real time, completely separate from my overall output mix level of things that are coming in. So that's my auxes. Aux 1 is for effects, reverbs and delays, purely for monitoring. Auxiliary 2 is the level balance or the volume balance of each of the individual inputs that will go to a streaming platform. But then with the cues, Q1, if I just open up my cue outputs here, Q1 is set to mix, so basically my headphones. So I'll be able to hear anything that I'm playing through the console through headphones. Anything that goes to the main mix, I will be able to hear. So for instance, if I put my headphones on now, anything that's not muted from down here, I will be able to hear, which is perfect. But you can see it's also mirrored to output 1 and 2. Now that automatically goes through to my MPC as a sample input. So the idea is anything that's playing on my computer, anything whatsoever, will automatically constantly be sending that feed to the MPC. So at any point I can open up a track in the MPC, click the sample button, and I've already got that audio coming in without having to patch it in or anything like that. It's automatically going to the MPC. So I could record the bus compressor signal back into the MPC, the mixer signal, the Eurorack, the tape, anything from the Mac. So Spotify, it's really easy to be able to use the MPC sampler the most efficient way possible, as it is always going to there. So even though you can see here Q1 is muted, if I open up here, even though it's muted, I'm sending the mix volume. So I'm not sending this level, I'm sending whatever the level is from here. So whatever I'm hearing or monitoring, as this is sort of my monitor level, whatever I'm monitoring, let's put this back to 0. I don't know why that's gone up too much. I'll be basically recording anything at this level here into the MPC. If I go to Q2, you'll see that Q2 isn't sending the mix. So Q2 is purely just sending anything that I have Q2 open to or unmuted for with whatever level I have it set at. Now this is going to line 3 and 4. Now this is an output on the back of the Apollo again, and this is purely just for sampling or sending those sounds to anything but the MPC. So 3 and 4 would either go to the tape cassette player, so I could have anything within the session. Say I wanted to record the bass coming out of my MPC to tape, I would just unmute the cue send here, plug the cable that comes out of the back of my audio interface 3 and 4, plug that signal into the input of the tape machine, and then I can record anything that I send from here to the tape machine. Exactly the same with the Eurorack system. So if I want to sample something to Eurorack, I have that coming out the same cable. This just means I won't be able to record to the Eurorack system and to the tape machine at the same time. I have to pick either or. Luckily, that's fine. I don't mind. I can just go straight to the Eurorack system and then out of that back into the tape machine if I want to. It just means I can't do them simultaneously at the same time, but it's a minor inconvenience. So you can see here all of these secondary ones here. Let me just mute the Eurorack back into itself. But this just means at the moment, as soon as I open up the console, anything that plays through the Mac, so any of the DAW information, anything that I've got playing through Chrome, so YouTube or anything, Spotify, Tidal, pretty much anything that I'm playing out of my Mac will automatically be sent down that cable, which at the moment is just plugged into the sample input of one of my Eurorack modules. So really quick and easy. Exactly the same kind of process as for my MPC. Anything that I'm playing ever, I will always have instant access to be able to resample that to either the tape machine, the cassette player, the MPC, or my Eurorack system. That brings us down to the outputs now. So if you remember, output 3 and 4 is for a cable that goes straight out for sampling, either to the Eurorack or to the cassette player. But I've also got more outputs. So far, I've got 8 outputs on the Apollo, right? 1 and 2 is outputs dedicated straight to the MPC. 3 and 4 is output dedicated straight to either the tape player or the Eurorack. But that leaves us with 5, 6, and 7 and 8. So 5, 6 is the bus compressor. So there's a bus compressor that I made years ago that I still use all the time. It's a stereo VCA bus compressor. That is set up to come out of outputs 5 and 6. And then outputs 7 and 8 goes straight out to my mixer, which is a small format, very low budget Mackie mixer. So it's a 12 channel Mackie Mix 12 it's called. So very small format. It's got 4 mono tracks with fixed 3-band EQ, but then it's got 4 stereo tracks with no EQ on it, just sort of like volume, output volume. So at any point I could send anything out to anything else. So for instance, I could take my Eurorack audio, send that out to the mixer on 7 and 8, but then I can go from the mixer and send the mixer out to the bus compressor on 5 and 6. You'll see now that all of my outputs are taken up. So 1 and 2, MPC, 3 and 4, cassette player or Eurorack, 5 and 6, bus compressor, 7 and 8 to the mixer. But now what this means is, let's just say I play, I'm just going to press start on the modular. You should start to hear that ambience come in a minute. You see now I've got the Eurorack track, I've got the mixer signal, and I've got the bus compressor signal. So in theory, I could record all 3 simultaneously. So I could have one pass of the Eurorack, I'll have a stem of the clean Eurorack signal, a stem of that Eurorack going through the mixer, and then another stem of the Eurorack going through the mixer into the bus compressor. Let me just stop that quickly. So again, this is why it's so important to get a grasp over the capabilities or the limitations of your interface. Utilizing the inputs and outputs as much as possible. Before we move over to the Pro Tools session, I just want to talk about the plugins that I've got working on here. So to start with, let's just put all of the, actually no, I will leave these as they are, because I'll leave these as they are just so we can go to the Pro Tools bit next and you'll see why I leave them like that. But on the drums section, so for instance on my MPC, you see here I've got MPC drums, MPC instruments and bass. The MPC's got 6 analog outputs. I'm using them as 3 stereo pairs, with 1 and 2 being the drums, 3 and 4 being the instruments, and 5 and 6 being the bass. If I open up all of these plugins, these are the plugins that I have running inside the console, and I'm recording the output signal. So these are committed processes. So anything that I play basically is going to commit that process for me. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn all of these off. This will mean that it will turn off the API Vision strip that's on my voice, but that's fine just for now. So I'm going to disable all insert plugins. So again, my voice may have changed a bit, but the reason I'm doing this, I'm going to play the MPC in a minute, where I've got a basic house beat. So I've got drums, bass, and a sort of a chord stabby Rhodes melody thing going on. And you'll see the difference in the overall sound without these insert plugins and with, and then I'll talk through what they're doing. So let's play it first, and then I'll bring the plugins in so you can hear the difference. Cool. So hopefully you heard the difference there. Far better. The main reason I'm doing this is not because the MPC doesn't sound very good. I don't mind the MPC on its own, but I like making electronic dance music, and I like making sort of old school sounding electronic dance music. So old school house, garage, and so on. And really, if the MPCs were used back then, let's talk about, say, like the late 90s, early 2000s, it was very rare that they was just using the MPC out straight to an audio interface into a computer. It probably would have gone through some kind of analog process, whether that's a mixer, anything, basically. It probably would have ran through something before it got down to its final recorded stage. And the reason I've chosen these is because I like the sound of them, really. The drums go through this API Vision strip. The main reason I use this strip, I've tried all of them, the SSL ones, the Neve ones, pretty much anything on UAD as a channel strip I've tried, and they're all really good. None of them are bad. But the reason I like this one is really just because the EQ sounds nice, and this expander is excellent for the type of drums that I like to make. So I'm just going to play the drums again, and I'm going to bring the expander in and out. So what you'll notice is this is like a transient designy sort of thing. Makes skippy drums sound even skippier. So yeah, I'll play it first of all without, and then I'll bring the expander in so you can just see exactly what it does to that drum beat. So hopefully there you can hear how much skippier it sounds. Obviously it shortens the tail of that open hat, but it just adds to the swing of those drums so much more, gives it a bit more punch. And you don't really gain that much in terms of peak volume, but it just sounds a bit pokier. I just love the sound of it for the style of drums that I'm using. The instruments go through the Manley Massive Passive. This has got a high and high mid boost. It's also got a sort of low mid and low sort of Pultec style sort of thing going on, I suppose. So you can see both of them. The low range, we've got a low boost at around 100 on a shelf. And we've also got a low mid cut, but also on a shelf. So what we're getting is that classic kind of Pultec curve where it's pulling down on a shelf from 270, but instead of it just completely getting rid of everything below 270, I'm then lifting a shelf from 100 by a bit more. So we end up getting that nice thickness to those instruments. With a nice bit of sheen on top. It's a lovely EQ, this one, for that. And then lastly, the bass goes through the Manley Verimue, which is a valve style compressor. Sounds really nice and thick, nice and warm, and it just holds the bass nicely without making it sound like it's overly compressed. So yeah, this is my kind of input fake analog console for the MPC. You'll notice that I've got no other processing other than the voice here. So the Eurorack has no processing on, normally because if I want to process it, I'll process it analog. So I'll come out like I have here, where it says 7 and 8. This means the Eurorack goes out to the mixer. I can mess around with the mixer settings, a bit of EQ, and then drive that signal out of the mixer into the bus compressor, and then record the clean signal, the mixer signal, and the bus signal, bus compressor signal completely separate from each other, but simultaneously. So that's part one. Hopefully that was helpful. Now let's move on to part two, where we look at the Pro Tools session. Okay, so we're in Pro Tools. This is the Pro Tools project. So this is my template, basically. As soon as I open it up, it is the 2025 project template. You can see I've got all of my individual inputs, which pretty much matches up exactly to what is in the Apollo console. So we've got the mic here, MPC drums, MPC instruments, MPC bass. I also, just on the far left here, if I just make this visible, at the moment it's not active and not visible, but I've got the multi-mono tracks. So each of those tracks in mono. For instance, I might be using the MPC and not abiding by the template I have in it, where I've got certain sounds going to a kick submix and everything is kind of pre-routed. So all kicks and drums go out 1 and 2, instruments will go 3 and 4 and so on. If I don't have that and I'm just using mono outputs, I've got the ability to do so. It's very rare, which is why it's hidden and not active. So let me just hide that back again. We've then got the Eurorack, we've then got the mixer, the bus compressor, the tape machine, and then the Mac. So I can record straight into Pro Tools anything that's playing on the Mac. So really nice and easy way to sample things again. Everything then goes to a mix bus. This just has a Pro L2 on it, but with no input gain. It's literally just there as a safety net. So if anything does start to go over while I'm producing something or editing something, like an idea for something, I know that it's not actually going to peak ever. And if it does, I can rein back in my mix. And then lastly, on the master, it's just a span, which just shows me the overall frequency content. Yeah, so anything that I record, I'll be able to see a nice frequency spectrum all the way from 10 Hertz all the way up to 30K. And obviously I've got my Nyquist line there for whatever the interface is set to. At the moment I'm working at 48K, always work at 48K, which is why the Nyquist line is at 24, which is good to see that's correct. So let me demonstrate. Let's go back to the Apollo console just quickly. So if I go to the Apollo console, you'll see if I play the Eurorack's going out to the mixer, 7 and 8, and then out of 7 and 8, or out of the mixer, sorry, it goes to 5 and 6, which is the bus compressor. So if I press play, you see we've got all these 3 individual inputs coming in. Let's go back to Pro Tools. I'm going to go to my Eurorack all the way down to the bus comp and put these into record. And you can see now I've got these as levels coming in. So let me just stop. I'm going to press record in Pro Tools. Let me just wait for the full ambience to die down. It's good enough. Now when I press record, I've now got completely individual recordings of that pass. So it might get to the end of it, and I think there was a part in it where it didn't really like the sound of it going through the compressor. I've always got the original. Let me just stop it. Nice. Let me stop there. Now you'll see I've got all of those individual recordings to choose from. So I've got the clean one, I've got the one going through the mixer, and then I've got the one that goes through the mixer and the bus compressor. Really nice. It's actual proper multi-tracking. So even though it's only a stereo track, I've got various processed versions of that recording, which is nice and helpful. The other side of it, which I haven't really spoken about yet, is taking advantage of the extra outputs I've gained from my aggregate device. So let's just say I'm on my bus compressor track here. I can go down to my outputs here, and you can see, look, I've got all of these named outputs. So 1 and 2 was the MPC. We already know that because that was how it was set in the console. 3 and 4 is the Eurorack and the tape. But then I can always go back out to the bus compressor here, or back out to the mixer for some EQ. But if you notice further down, I've got these sum out 1, 2, 3, 4. Now these are outputs from the Evo interface, because remember the 8 outputs on the Apollo are taken up with going to the MPC, going to the Eurorack or tape, going to the bus compressor, and going to the mixer. But I've still got 8 possible outputs on the Evo. So what I'm using these for is utilizing the 4 stereo tracks or 4 stereo inputs on the Mackie mixer and treating that section of the mixer as like a summing mix. So for instance, if I put this track now, the bus compressed mix of my Eurorack, I can send this out, Evo 7 and 8, which is hardwired to the last stereo track of my mixer. So let's just play this. If I get rid of the mixer recording, put this into record, now what you'll see is I'm playing my bus compressed Eurorack mix back out through Pro Tools, or the Evo, sorry, into the mixer, and I'll be able to record that in real time. So while that's recording, I'm just going to make some changes to the mix. I'll just play with the output volume. Let's change the gain of that channel. So I've got all this possibility. Let me just stop there. So now I've got the original Eurorack track, the original recording, but going through the mixer and the compressor, and then what that recording was from the compressor back through the mixer with a load of different changes on it, all at the same time. So currently I've got 16 inputs and 16 outputs, and all of the inputs bar one mono input is already fixed, ready to go, no need for a patch bay. And all of the outputs are set up going to somewhere. So the Apollo outputs are going to various devices to send signals to resample or to mess around with and send signals about, whereas the Evo outputs the 8 Evo outputs are strictly for summing. So I can go out to my summing mixer, as I've got here, 4 stereo tracks, and then do some analog summing. Say I want to go to my MPC tracks and go to my MPC drums, bass, and instruments, put that into record. Sweet. So there you can see I've got the individual stems. So I've got the drum stem. So I've got all of these stems that have been recorded through the console. Again, these are committed stems, so they've got all the processing that I had on there before. So the API channel strip for the drums, the manly massive passive, for the instruments, and the slam, or the very mu, for the bass. But then again, I could send these anywhere. So I could take this bass track, and if I want to further compress it, I can send it out the bus compressor. In order for this to work, I need to make sure that I go back to my console and make sure that that output isn't taken up here. If it's taken up here, no signal will pass through it. So you just go in here, change both of these to monitor. I can come out of here now, go back to my Pro Tools session, record that, go to my bus channel, press record. So now that is my bass that has been recorded from the MPC through the Manley Very Mu, being sent out of Pro Tools into the bus compressor and recorded down as a signal. I can do exactly the same thing, but instead send it to one of my mixer channels, let's say sum out 4. So the last tracks on the mixer, come to my mixer track instead and record that in. See, I've obviously overdriven it there just so you can hear the real-time recording. Press solo on this. Loads of distortion off the top of that. But you can see it's so quick and easy to make sure that I've got anything that I would like to send somewhere, record to, mess around with. I have the option of doing that just because it's pre-prepared, basically. One thing that's very vital in Pro Tools or any DAW, things like Logic and so on, is how you label and name the inputs and outputs. So if I go to the I/O section of this Pro Tools session, you can see here for the inputs, I've got all of the inputs possible, everything named correctly. You can see here if I want to, I could record auxiliary 1. So if I wanted to record the effects I've got in my Apollo console that I'm monitoring, say that reverb for the vocal mic, I can record that as well separately. All the individual Evo inputs. So inputs Evo 1 and 2 would be the mixer inputs basically here. Exactly the same sort of thing. But this mixer is post Apollo, whereas Evo 1 and 2 is the input signal, the analog input signal of the Evo, whereas the mixer version here is the ADAT version, so the digitally converted version, which means it goes through the console app, so I could, if I wanted to, put some processing in on the way in. If I go to the output, we've got exactly the same thing, master output, then we've got 1 and 2 going to the MPC, UR rack and tape, bus compressor, mixer, so on and so on. All the digital outputs for the Evo and the analog outputs for the Evo are all set up ready. If I go to bus, this is where I can set up various output buses, which kind of mimics a scaled down version of my mixer template. So it's very quick and easy to be able to get very close to the mixing stage of a track if I really get a composition or a production that I'm working on that I'm liking the sound of and I want to work further on it. I've got all these possibilities for buses to open pre-named. But you can see it's very, very important to get everything named. I mean, even if I go to the inserts, I've got the bus compressor set up as an insert plugin. So I could just put the plugin or the input, say here instead. Let's make sure that none of these are going out. Let's put all of these back to standard. So all of these are going to go to the mix bus. Sum out, let's make sure that goes back to the mix bus. There we go. So all our channels are going to the mix bus, but I want to have an EQ on my bass, but then I want to, instead of having outputted and recorded through the compressor, I can just go to my bus compressor here. So now, hopefully, if I got this set up correctly, here you get that doubling. That's because I'm listening to it inside Pro Tools as well as inside the console application. So I just have to mute it here so I don't listen to that back. And now when I play it, it's now using the hardware insert as a bus compressor. Good stuff. So that talks or covers pretty much the Pro Tools side of things, or the DAW side of things. Next, we're going to look at OBS. Okay, so we're in OBS. I'm actually recording right now, so what I'm recording in. But the reason I'm just talking about OBS is, say if you're recording content or anything, having the various stems available to you. So you've got a stereo, so as soon as you play the video back, you'll be able to hear certain things, but then you'll also have the options to have individual stems of individual things if you want to do an edit later on, or if something was a little bit off and the balances were off on the stereo recording. So here, as you can see, I've got the screen here. These are all the various things that I have. I do have a 1080 divider. So this little line, you see that shows up just about here in a sec. This little 1080 divider, that basically just shows me where I have to crop my screen to if I want to record something 1080 rather than full widescreen. This is fully widescreen, so I'm just leaving it as is. I also have a hide here, which just shows up here, just in the top corner here. This basically just means that you can't see what date or time it is. Which is helpful. It just means that the only thing you're gonna end up seeing is the things relevant to the program that you're working on. You're not going to see what's going on up here. Like, I mean, I can see now, but you can't see. Just behind here is the time, the date, Wi-Fi set, it's just crap that's not necessary for other people to see. As you can see here in my audio mixer, I've got all these different audio inputs. So you can see the mic here, the mic's coming in. I've got the mixer, which is a device made in loopback, or a virtual device, which is purely just the mixer signal. I've got one for the MPC. So anything that I do on the MPC, here we go, if I just go to the drums, you'll see the MPC comes in on its own stem. Same for the Eurorack, if I play the Eurorack. Lovely, comes in on its own stem. Anything from the Mac, which is also the DAW returns, which is why the DAW is sort of muted out here at the minute. But anything that plays through the Mac, completely its own stem. An Apollo Q Mix, which is this here, as its own stem. So if I've got a recording of the session that I'm doing, or a live stream, I'll probably be using OBS to do it. I will always have the original audio recording of my balance here to go along with the video. Or if I want to do an edit later on, I've got individual stems that will save with the video. So if I drag it into, say, I don't know, Logic, or anything really, Logic, any kind of good audio editing software, you'll get all the tracks of audio, up to 6 tracks of audio. So I'll get a mic on its own, a Mac on its own, mixer on its own, MPC on its own, Eurorack on its own, bus compressor on its own, an Apollo Q Mix on its own. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me just go back to here. So that's how I'm utilizing my small project studio, the Signal Flow, getting pretty much as I can out of it, literally squeezing as many different possibilities of inputs, outputs, sound design possibility, processing possibility, mix and matching things really quickly, rather than having to use a patch bay. I did use a patch bay for a very long time, but I've just found, even though it's good to have a patch bay, I still have one, I just don't use it. Once everything's kind of set up in a certain way, it's not limiting you in what you can do, it's just opening up what you can do, depending on where you send certain things. There are limitations here and there. For instance, I can't record going from output 3 and 4. I can't take that sample signal and have it going both to the Squid sample and the tape machine at the same time, unless I get like an adapter cable for it, but I'm not bothered. So if you made it this far to the video, well done. It was a hard one, very geeky. If you're using an Apollo and you've got another interface that has an ADAT output assigned to it, where you can plug them up together. I've got the Apollo working as the master and the Evo working as a slave at the minute, but they're working together as one interface, so I can take advantage of all analog and digital inputs and outputs. If you don't have an ADAT input on your external or other device or other audio interface, you can just do them as USBs. So if you've got spare audio interfaces, instead of having to think like, oh, I'm going to buy a whole new interface because I just want 2 more inputs, think about the aggregate device. So yeah, well done. You made it this far. Hopefully it was helpful. As normal, any comments, any questions, anything like that, please just leave them. And I'll get back to you as soon as I can, which will probably be rare. But try. I'm not going to lie. Like, subscribe, all the other stuff that other people say. See you later.